Hey everyone, welcome to another video. This time we are going to be looking at a composition that has kind of been lost in the meta. And I will be completely honest with you, I don't think this is like a composition that you're ever likely to get first place with unless you're finding a 3-star Jin. We're talking about Vanguard snipers. Now before we dive into this, obviously got to thank G2A for sponsoring the channel. Link to the marketplaces in the description below if you feel like checking it out. I believe they've got a sale on right now, so feel free to have a look. If not, don't worry about it. Let's just jump into this game. So the way that you play this is very easy, to be completely honest with you. What you're looking for a start is you can play any of the classic starts. So for instance, you can play your very, very classic cybernetic start if you really want to, which would be Leona, Fiora, and Lucian. Obviously just put one item on all of them. That gives you the early cybernetic bonus. Now you don't have to play that. You can very easily play the Vanguard bonus as well. So it's either Poppy or Leona, but I would say that Poppy is less contested than Leona right now, so you're more likely to get Leonas. At least that was definitely the case for me in this game. And then you're just going to want to slam any kind of Vanguards in. If you find Poppy, what you can do is you can end up having the 4 Vanguard star, and this is like a really, really strong star in a lot of scenarios because magic damage is a little less bursty and a little less prevalent, and most damage comes through basic attacks, so Vanguards as a 4 are really strong in the start, so you can play it this way. I will show you how I played the early game start, but this was just because this is what I naturally walked into. I played Caitlyn, Twisted Fate, Blitzcrank, and I played Shen. So I basically played a 4 Chrono Star, and then at level 5 I found the Ashe. Wherever the Ashe is, she's here. So at level 5 I found the Ashe. So my build ended up looking something like this. Now the reason I went Vanguard Sniper this game is because the items I got were basically, yo, you got some infinity edges. So what I ended up having in the early game, and because I do recommend combining items, as soon as you've got an item that you would consider good, I would just recommend combining it because it can really help carry you and protect your HP as the game progresses. I ended up with a Trap Claw and an Infinity Edge, which I thought, well, what can I actually do with this? Well, I can play Brawler Blaster, which would have been okay because I had the Blitzcrank. Or I can play Cybernetics, but I didn't really have a Cybernetic start. What I ended up doing is like, well, let's just try Vanguard Sniper. It's been a while since I've played it, but, you know, I think it's a pretty solid comp, and no one really contests it. No one really contests the Vanguards outside of Poppy. No one really contests the Vanguards, the Snipers outside of Caitlyn for the Hyper Roll composition, the Xayah one. So Jin is relatively uncontested right now, and the Vanguards are relatively uncontested outside of Poppy. So then what I ended up doing is when I essentially transitioned out of this. So the first thing that I did when I transitioned out of this is I dropped the Twisted Fate, I think, and I dropped the Shen. So I ended up with something like this to begin with. And then I ended up putting on the Jace and the Mordekaiser as my front line. I had a Jace too, so Jace was pretty strong. The next transition that I made out of this was to add the Wukong, which brought me back to my 2 Chrono, but then I got rid of the Blitzcrank, and then we added the Leona. So this gives you your level 6 base, right? This gives you your level 6 base. What you eventually want to do is drop the Caitlyn, and then bring in the Jin, okay? So you bring in the Jin, you try to get him to 2-star, and then as a level 7, you're going to want to have the Karma. This gives you your very good basic level 7 composition that you want to have as Vanguards. Then itemization for Jin. Okay, so Trap Claw's a really good item for Jin. He's going to block an ability. Infinity Edge, and you can either double up on Infinity Edge, or you can go down the Last Whisper route. I went down the Last Whisper route just because I felt like a lot of people are running Poppies and Bramble Vests. I actually think on reflection in this game, it probably would have been better for me to go double Infinity Edge. You can probably make some guesses why, but I'll talk about why in the actual video. And then I got a load of GAs, and I just put the GAs on these guys. These are the most important Vanguards that you'd want to get resurrected. And then I also just stacked extra items on my Jace and on my Wukong. So any extra items that I got were from my Jace and my Wukong. And they sort of helped me get to the position that I did. Now, like I said, I don't think this is a top 1 build unless you get like a 3-star Mordekaiser with items, a 3-star Jace, a 3-star Jin. It's not really meant to be a top 1 composition, but it's a composition that can do well and is quite strong in the mid game. And, you know, with the right circumstances, can definitely net you a top 2 or top 3. At level 8, by the way, you bring on the Thresh, and then you just want to put stuff on your bench that is useful. So Lulus, Wukongs, Blitzcranks, anything like that, put those on your bench so Thresh can pull them in. And this is what my composition looked like overall, and I'll put that in the description below for you as well. So let's have a look at this game where I played Vanguard Snipers, and I'm going to talk to you about why I played Vanguard Snipers throughout the process, in terms of, you know, looking at the items that we had available to us, and also I've got to turn the music on, and in terms of the decision making that I made. I think realistically what I will say is that this is, again, like I'm going to reiterate, this is a build that isn't particularly amazing. Like, it's a solid build, it's uncontested. If you get the right parts, it's very likely that you're going to get a top 4 at least. I think it's a pretty consistent build to gain LP, albeit slowly. And sometimes, you know, I wouldn't recommend searching to go this build, but what I would say is that if you get the items that set up for it, it's still a build that can function pretty well in the current meta. So I don't want to oversell you something here, guys. I don't want to say we found the best, you know, the next best build since sliced bread. What I'm telling you is that this is still a good build that can function in the right way. And because Vanguards and 2 Vanguards are quite strong, it's a build that can really protect your HP in the mid game. And that's kind of what I want to iterate at this point in time. This is a build that can and will protect your HP in the mid game. And if you find yourself up quite literally shit creek without a paddle and you don't know where you're going, you can default into this build because it's quite easy to transition into. And that's something else that's worth noting. This build transitions very nicely because it's quite easy to find the units that you need, especially when you get towards level 6 and 7. And you're going to see how I did that in this game. I want you to focus on the transition that I made, because I kind of came out of a build that could have gone anywhere. My build could have gone Blaster Brawler. My build could have gone Kale, I guess, if I had better items, to be honest with you. But it's a build that I essentially walked into because I just felt like it was the most relevant and the best given what I was facing in the lobby. So here you can see that I've gone 2 Chrono with Brawler early on. I think this is just a good start. Look, I didn't want to sell the Caitlyn because she's a 2-star. 2-star Caitlyn is pretty strong, so I decided not to sell the Caitlyn. And I actually very quickly decided not to go a Poppy or a Xayah build, which is why I leveled up this early on. I leveled up at this point in time because I sort of said to myself, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to go for a Poppy or a Xayah build with the current items. Although the Xayah build was definitely on the cards with the items that I had. Like, I could have gone Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and gone for the Xayah, but I just felt that, look, with the units that I had, that actually I was more comfortable going for the Vanguard Sniper build. And I just think that there were a lot of other people contesting the Xayah build and Hyper Roll builds in general. And so I thought, okay, let's go for something different. Let's not play the Hyper Roll builds. Hyper Roll builds make me a little bit sick on the inside anyway. Let's look for something else to play with. And I decided to go 4 Chrono early on. I think 4 Chrono is actually quite strong early on, especially because you start to get that attack speed ramp up a bit more readily. And you're going to see, actually, it was a build that did really well for me. I sold off on my bench, by the way, to get to 10 gold. I wanted to make sure my economy was looked after. And this was an interesting carousel, of course. We got the spam of the Infinity Edges for me, so this was definitely going to combine into an Infinity Edge. So realistically, I could have very likely gone down the route of going down the Xayah build, because I had an Infinity Edge plus another Gauntlet, which could have been a Last Whisper. You know, it was definitely something to consider in this game. But again, you know, I, as you can see here, I found the Ashe and I thought, you know what, we're on 4 Chrono, 2 Sniper. Like, we're 4 Chrono, 2 Sniper. This is actually quite strong. And you can see me commit a sort of an extra Brawler's Glove to Caitlyn to increase her chance of critical strike. And I think actually this build in general is super strong. 4 Chrono, 2 Sniper early on is very good. I obviously struggled just a little bit here, but we still made it through. 2-star Kai'Sa with Morel on icon is actually disgusting. And actually, I thought, well, actually, do you know what? We have a Trap Claw here. Trap Claw is a really nice item for Jhin. So we could just put Trap Claw on Caitlyn and then just play for a Vanguard Sniper. It would have to be a transition that happened eventually, you know, some point in the future. But, you know, like this, I just put the Trap Claw on. But I think, you know, I set myself up for a pretty solid sniper transition just with the items that I had. And you can see here, like, it's pretty good. We end up losing to the Lucian, which was just a little bit upsetting. This guy was probably of equal strength to me, with the Lucian still being really strong. But you know what? It's perfectly fine. You know, we're still at a good HP. We're at 98 HP coming into the Krugs. We have nearly 30 gold. You know, we're at 24. So we're not too far behind economy-wise, but we have also leveled up. And we are at a really healthy HP. One of the most important things when you're going up against hyper roll compositions is to think, I need this healthy, like, I need like a healthy start in the game. You know, I need to be able to quite freely take damage in the mid game, because after 3-1, suddenly, you know, people start having ridiculous comps. Like, people start just having 3 stars after 3-1, and you need to be able to sort of manage your HP in a way that you are probably going to start tanking a bit of damage at this point in the game. So when you're going up against hyper roll compositions, think about, I need to field the strongest board that I physically can until I feel ready to transition. And you see right here, I found the Jhin. That's another good indicator. I was like, okay, I found some crucial parts of this composition. The Jhin is obviously very important. I decided to put the Jhin on over the Ashe just for the damage output. And again, you know, I'm fully expecting over the course of the next 2 rounds to lose a bit of HP. But what's most important for me is trying to prevent a huge HP loss. I'm not looking to, you know, I really don't want to lose a massive amount of HP. So I'm essentially looking to protect my HP as much as possible whilst I start to look for the correct units and correct parts for my composition. And as you see right here, we are starting to struggle in terms of units. Now, this might have been a mistake. I decided that actually maybe a Jhin with those items would be stronger than a Caitlyn with those items. Maybe that was an incorrect. Maybe the 2-star Caitlyn was just better. But I did feel like, I was like, okay, Jhin with these items is pretty good. Maybe he can get some work done. Unfortunately, the Shen kind of ruined my groove here. My Jhin ended up missing all of his shots. Shen kind of does that. But, you know, it's perfectly fine. Again, we're still protecting our HP as much as we can. Now, ideal item for me here would be the recurve bow, because that would give me a Last Whisper. The next ideal item would be the BF sword for 2 reasons. I could have gone double Infinity Edge. I could have gone Last Whisper, obviously, if I got the recurve bow, but actually what I get access to with this BF sword is GA, which is actually pretty good on some of your vanguards. So for instance, I would be looking to have it on my Jace and on my Wukong, because they're both really important when you bring them back in. I actually sacrificed my Chrono buff for the Celestial buff here. I just felt that, you know, for Chrono, it falls off eventually, and having 2 Chrono at this stage in the game where things are getting a bit more bursty is probably fine. You know, I'm probably only missing out 15% attack speed, and actually having the Celestial buff on will allow me to protect my front line a little bit more. There's the Karma, which is obviously a big deal, because now I have the Dark Star. I don't think 3 Dark Star is strong enough to randomly throw in the composition, and I decide to put in Ezreal. I guess I changed my mind. I guess I changed my mind about the Chrono buff over the Celestial buff, but hey, it's all experimenting. It's all finding out what works. And this is the guy that beat me earlier with the Lucian with the Giant Slayer, but this time round I ended up losing again. There you go. He beat me twice. Feels bad, man. But again, like I said, I'm at 86 HP. I'm protecting my HP as much as possible. And what you can see here is I'm also starting to pick up the Vanguards, which is great. Now I've got Jace, which is really awesome. So eventually I'm going to sell the Shen, give the Jace the GA, and then we're looking for the rest of the Vanguards. So we're looking for either Poppy or Leona, but I think it's more likely that I find Leona, given that Poppy's quite contested. And then we're also looking to get Wukong as well. So going up to level 6 is pretty important here. The reason being is that, level 7, because this is the sort of the point where my composition comes online. So I find the 2-star Jace, and look at the build that I'm still running. I'm still running 2 Chrono, I'm still keeping my Shen around, but I have the 3 Dark Star involved now as well. Unfortunately, like this Irelia, 2-star Irelia at 4-1 with 2 Infinity Edges, I'm just not beating that. I don't think much can end up beating that. But this is the point where I want to stabilize, right? There's the Leona. I rolled past the Leona. What are you doing, Excoundrel? Here. Oh, I bring in the Celestial bonus. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. There's Leona. I pick up the second Leona. There you go. So I ditched the Chrono buff to go for the Celestial with the Dark Star, which does make me quite strong. I think that sort of keeps my strength up at this point in time. Unfortunately, we are still kind of weak. So the point, I think the good way to assess your strength in the game is like, how many rounds am I losing? Who am I losing to? What types of comps am I losing to? And how many 2-stars do they have? And I can see I'm quite clearly losing to a lot of comps that I maybe shouldn't be. So what I'm doing right now is I'm essentially rolling to try and stabilize. What's really important for me at this point in time is that I manage to stabilize and protect my HP. So I'm looking for Wukong to go into the 4 Vanguards. I'm looking for a 2-star Jhin. And then at that point, I can start to level up and go back to my normal routine. I need to get my 4 Vanguards on, I need to get a 2-star Jin, and I need to start stabilizing, because this is the tricky part of transitioning. It's about judging how strong you are and when you should roll and when you should level. Now at 51 HP, I'm still over half HP. I'm still moderately comfortable. That's okay. The other thing that has helped me in terms of losing is I'm actually going to get a more carousel priority, which is going to allow me to pick up the Last Whisper, which is good, because that's going to allow me to get through some of the beefier front lines that we've got going on, you know, with people who've picked up armor. Now, what I would say is that actually it's quite likely that the Infinity Edge might have been better, just because there is only one player playing Poppy with Bramble Vest, so actually Last Whisper might not have been the most powerful. But what you're doing here, what you're seeing me do here, is essentially roll down and look for the Wukong, which is going to allow me to get into the 4 Vanguards. And then we're going to be looking to pick up any Jaces and any Jins. And I sell off all of the 4 costs that I picked up. Now, you know, I picked up those 4 costs, which you might think, why are you doing that, Excoundrel? Why are you picking up random 4 costs? Well, it's to reduce the number of 4 costs in the overall pool. We just want to make sure that we are more likely to find a Jin. So by removing things that aren't Jin, you know, we're in a good spot. So what I'm looking for on this roll down here is Wukongs, I'm looking for Jaces, and I'm looking for any extra 2-stars that I can get. And so what I ended up doing here is rolled all the way down to 0. I picked up a huge set of upgrades for my composition, including Jin 2-star. I got a Jace 3-star, and I also have now got the Thresh, which I intend to bring on later on. Now, unfortunately, versus the Candyland Poppy build, who is now level 8 with 6 sorcerers, I just wasn't winning that. He was just doing too much damage, and obviously sorcerer builds generally tend to counter builds that I've got. We go into this neutral round, and my end goal from the next part of the game is to go to level 8 and bring in Thresh. At that point, I'm essentially just building a board for things that Thresh can pull in. There is not a huge amount of point going to level 9 other than to add a Celestial bonus, which would be Lulu. So the level 9 edition would have been Lulu if I found it. But as you can see here, I'm kind of close to getting to level 8. So what I do is I just wait around, and then I'm going to level up and put Thresh in. We've got all of the 2-stars that we need. We've got a 3-star Jace. We've got a 2-star Wukong. Extra items will now go on top of Jace where necessary. But, you know, we're in a moderately strong position. We're doing okay. We still lose to a lot of different builds. So, for instance, we end up losing to this this Brawler Blaster build. His misfortune just ended up getting a huge ultimate, but that's okay. Like, I'm perfectly okay with that being the case, because now we hit level 8, we should start to stabilize a bit more. We should start to bring in those Wukongs. We should start to bring in any extra useful units, and I think this is the point in the game where I can say, okay, we're pretty stable. We're pretty stable, and now it's all about positioning. So one thing that you need to be aware of is that Trapclaw is only good once, right? So Trapclaw can be used for a couple of things. Either you use Trapclaw to protect your Ashe from getting blitzcranked, so you actually get an Ashe ultimate off in the round, or you use Trapclaw to sort of protect against a Cho'Gath ultimate, protect against a Vi ultimate, etc, etc. It doesn't. I don't think it actually protects against Irelia ultimates, because I think Irelia's ultimate counts as a basic attack, which unfortunately means that she actually will land it anyway. The other thing that you need to think about when positioning Vanguard snipers, especially when positioning your Jin, is which target do you want Jin to attack first, and then which targets do you want Jin to follow up on. So it is very important that Jin gets a target that Jin gets a target that he can immediately burst out and then continue to apply pressure to the board. So that's important when playing this build, is the positioning of Jin and finding out which side of the board that you want him to focus on, because he'll immediately attack the target that is closest to him, and then he'll move on to the target that is next closest to him, and so on and so forth. I find a Celestial Orb, by the way, and I do end up adding that. It does just give me some extra lifesteal, which will help me sort of get through some of these more difficult rounds to navigate. And now what you're seeing me do on the bench is just like putting on stuff that is good versus it's putting on stuff that is good versus most people. So I bring an extra Wukong on, bring an extra Lulu on, an extra Blitzcrank, all of that is perfectly fine. Now, I was a little bit mispositioned versus the guy playing the Ziggs battery, which I thought was really funny. He's my friend, actually. I just found it funny that he was playing the Ziggs battery build. So what I do here is Sorry, I just had to close the door. I just split my Vanguards up a little bit, and I want my Jin to attack the Poppy pretty quickly, because Poppy doesn't actually have that much defense, and Last Whisper is pretty good versus her. So I thought that maybe that would give me the best chance of beating this guy, but he had a 2-star Zerath, unfortunately. He had 6 sorcerers. That's just a rough build for me to have to face up into. But if I didn't kill the Poppy, I think it was actually quite likely that I ended up losing entirely. So killing the Poppy might have kept me in this game for the time being. And as you can see, there are two people that are doing really well, and the rest of the lobby is kind of down and out. So for me, it was about deciding who I was more likely to face, and this is where it came, like, this was really important, basically. I'm going to roll down looking for extra units to pull in, so I'm obviously looking for anything that's going to have some kind of CC, and I found a 2-star Wukong, and I decide to... I should have picked up the Lulu there, but that's fine. I think I beat this guy. This guy has got the Blaster Brawler build that was beating me earlier on, but with the fact that I've got a really beefy front line now of Vanguards, I think, you know, I have a better chance versus the player with the Brawler Blaster. And now I have to work out, like, what is most likely that I end up and who am I most likely to face in this scenario? And I think because I haven't faced against the Void Brawler guy for quite a while, I decided to position specifically for the Void Brawler. What I end up doing is just putting my Jhin the furthest away from the Cho'Gath. I also want the Cho'Gath to get focused down first before he can cast. So Cho'Gath not casting is actually really important here, because that stops the CC landing, and that gives less time for the mana battery to wind up, and it gives less time for the Vel'Koz to do his work. So I end up beating the Void Brawler guy. Now, I think, given the HP totals that the Blaster Brawler player has and the Poppy player has, it's just quite unlikely that I beat either of them. So I think I've kind of resigned to third position being my end position here. But what you can see is that I positioned specifically for the Blaster Brawler player, because I only faced his clone last time, so I hadn't faced the Blaster Brawler player for quite some time. And that actually gives me an extra round to work with. We get into the carousel round, and I think I end up going for the Rabadon's Death Cap for the Jace. My friend was pinging it, and I thought, do you know what, actually that makes a lot of sense. What I think actually might have been better on reflection was the Dragon's Claw, because that might have allowed my Jace to survive longer versus the player with the poppies. Also, what might have been better in this situation was bringing the 2-star Lulu on. This might have been the mistake for me here. I decided to keep the Thresh on, thinking, oh, he's going to pull the 2-star Lulu on. I probably should have sold the Wukong in this scenario, and said, okay, I'm selling the Wukong, let's just bring the Lulu on. Unfortunately, we do end up going down to the Sorcerer player. Maybe the play was to actually just put the Lulu on to begin with, but I would have lost the Chrono bonus, so that's the way I thought about it. But yeah, I just want you guys to think about this build. If you are in a situation where you don't know what to build, Vanguard Sniper is still very relevant and can still work really nicely.